Too many of us are not living our dreams because we're living our fears. Do you find yourself caught up in the thought of fear, worrying that the worst case scenario is indeed happening to you? You convince yourself that it's rational and that this is the truth. You fall deep into that hole of fear, so far down into the rabbit hole that you can no longer see the light. You feel trapped. Maybe you feel tightness in your chest. You're having trouble sleeping. Or maybe you feel sick to your stomach. Or you're clenching your jaw so tight and tightening your shoulders up. All of these physical symptoms are signs of worry and fear, signs that you're living in this irrational state of being. Fear thoughts are those persistent worries, those thoughts that take over your mind, the thoughts of the worst possible outcome that you believe is true. So I wanted to tell you a personal story today, an example of a time where I let fear completely take over me. I lived in that worst case scenario, and I believed it was happening. I believed it was the truth. A while ago, I was in the midst of a personal injury lawsuit, and I was pretty worried and panicked about it. I didn't really know what to expect. So I found myself, Googling and researching different forums and blog posts about what to expect. What does it look like when you're going through a personal injury claim? So I had read on one of these blog posts that sometimes these insurance companies will send out a private investigator, someone to follow you around and really just make sure your claim is legitimate. So after I read that blog post, I somehow convinced myself that that was me. I was living in the worst case scenario that somehow a private investigator was following me. And I lived in that reality, and I believed it was true. I remember closing my blinds, making sure no one could see into my apartment. I was so paranoid. Every time I'd leave and go somewhere, I'd look around and see if cars were following me. I remember one time we went to the gym, and there was this man filming some of the equipment at the gym, and I convinced myself that he was following me and filming me at the gym, that he was this private investigator filming me for the insurance company. I was living in that worst case scenario. And not only that, I believed it was happening. I believed it was true. My fears had totally taken over my mind, and I was living in that reality. And although that could have possibly been true, it wasn't true. I wasn't being followed at all. And in fact, a week later, I got an offer for them to settle. But I convinced myself that this was happening. I saw everything through this lens of fear and worry, this irrational place of being. Now, this might seem like an extreme case of paranoia and fear to you, but the truth is your mind will focus on potential threats as a survival mechanism. Something may have happened to you in your past, something really bad or traumatic, and you're holding on to that experience. So when something new comes in and it triggers that deep wound and fear inside you, all of a sudden, you get those emotions coming right back to the surface. You feel fearful, you're worried, and your mind goes to the worst possible scenario to protect you, to keep you safe, because you don't want that thing to happen again. You don't like those feelings that are coming up. So the only way you know to protect yourself is to worry. What could happen? And is that happening now? Living in a state of fear can lead to anxiety, depression, paranoia. It prevents you from living a quality life, from enjoying right now and living in the present moment. Think about me when I thought I was being followed. I was depressed. I was closing my blinds, living in the darkness because I thought someone was watching me through the windows. I was constantly paranoid and looking for people following us while we were driving. I was living in this fearful state constantly. It's no way to live. I was not enjoying the present moment. I couldn't even be present because I was so consumed by these thoughts of fear and worry. So if you're currently stuck in a cycle of fear thoughts, living in the worst possible scenario, I'm going to help you out today. I'm going to give you my 3 tips on how you can pull yourself out of those fear thoughts and finally start living in this present moment and enjoying your life again. So my first tip is to find a mantra and repeat it over and over again. Find one that feels right to you. Write it yourself. I always use the one from Louise Hay where she says, "All is well. Everything is working out for my highest good. And out of this experience, only good will come, and I am safe. I know it sounds kind of long, but once you've said it enough times, you totally memorize it. And find one that works for you. If that one doesn't feel right, find one that really hits home, that addresses the fear that you're having. By repeating mantras, you're reprogramming your mind to focus on something positive, something calming. You're going to go from this fearful, worried state to a calm one. And when I say repeat these mantras, I mean repeat them over and over again. You know, Louise Hay will say, babble it incessantly. I would sit in the bathtub and just repeat them over and over and over again until I felt myself calm down. I felt myself feel relaxed. By reprogramming your thoughts, you're retraining yourself to not be so fearful. You're snapping yourself back into this present moment. You're pulling yourself out of that fear cycle. So my second tip is to get out of your head. Use exercise to pull you out of your head and get back into your body. You could go for a run, go for a walk. You could just shake or dance or just move your body. But find ways to release that tension. There's a reason they say, to take your dog for a run or walk, or your child, make them run around and exhaust themselves. Because when you're exhausted, you don't feel that tension or that pent-up energy anymore. You can feel calm and relaxed. So it's the same for you. When you're feeling tense, your emotions are really high, you're freaked out and paranoid, exhaust yourself physically. Go for that run or walk, go to the gym and lift weights, dance around your house. Do something to exhaust your body so that you're finding yourself back into this calm state and you're no longer tense and on edge and fearful and worried. So my third tip is to surrender and let it go. If your mind has already gone to the worst possible scenario, the worst possible outcome, then you know it. You know the worst possible thing that could happen. So what else can you do? Sometimes it's just out of your hands. And the best thing is to just say, well, now I know the worst that could happen. I can try and let it go. Or, okay, if that's the worst that can happen, I've faced it now. I don't have to worry and think about it. I know the possibilities and I can just surrender to it. Know that sometimes you're just not in control of things. And by surrendering, it can give you a sense of peace. So for example, with me in my lawsuit, where I thought maybe the insurance company had sent private investigators to follow me around, even if that were the truth, even if they were following me around, oh well, so what? I wasn't doing anything wrong. Even if they were following me, what were they going to see? Nothing. So I faced my worst case scenario and I said, oh well, even if that's happening, I'm not doing anything wrong, so I have to let it go. I have to keep enjoying my life. I can't live in this paranoid, depressive state. That isn't living. I would suggest writing out the worst possible scenario, facing it, and surrendering to it. But also remember, 99% of the time, that worst case scenario never happens. I was not being followed. That was totally in my head. And in fact, I got the settlement a week later. I was so paranoid that I believed that was happening. I'm sure you can relate to that feeling. Remember to live in this current moment and know that whatever is happening is for your best. All right, so to recap my 3 tips, we have number 1, use mantras. Use mantras to reprogram your thoughts, pull you out of those worries and fears and into a calm place. And tip number 2 is get out of your head. Get into your body. Go for a run, go for a walk. Find an exhausting exercise to make you feel relaxed and back to this calm place. And tip number 3 is to surrender. Face that worst possible scenario and then surrender to it and let it go. Once you know the worst thing that could happen, you don't have to live in it. It's just a small possibility. And in fact, 99% of the time, it never occurs. So try and just move forward, get back to this present moment, and enjoy your life again. All right, thank you so much for watching this video. I truly appreciate it as always, and I hope that you found it helpful, that you pull yourself out of that fear cycle. I totally know what it's like to to be in that state of mind where you're fearing the worst. It's so unhealthy. You can be so depressed when you're living like that. So I truly hope from the bottom of my heart that you take these tips seriously and that you put them to use.